Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to welcome you all onto this call today. And we're going to be joined by, well, we are being joined by Charlie Ashley Roberts, who's going to talk to us about how to do everything that we want to do in our lives without feeling overwhelmed. So welcome, Charlie. Thanks very much for doing this today.
You're more than welcome. I've rather regretting that as you introduce it. I'm like, really? Is that what I'm going to talk about? It is what I'm going to talk about. So yeah, I'm Charlie and I'm a mum of two small children, and I run my own business, a coaching business, and I specialise in women in leadership and business. And my favourite thing about coaching is looking at people's faces when they realise that they have a choice. And I'm hoping that today you are going to realise that you have some choices and be able to make some of those and feel less overwhelmed and more in control, if control is even possible. That's a whole conversation for another day. But today we're going to talk about life work balance, particularly in terms of running your business and having a life. And we're going to cover reflecting on your business and identifying an area that you'd like to improve on, learning to reduce those feelings of overwhelm and get more productive when you're working, and also creating boundaries and learning to say no to things which no longer serve you and yes to those things we do. So just a small amount, it's all going to be great. But one thing I would really love you to do is, first of all, grab a pen and paper if you don't have one, or have something that you can write down and draw pictures on, so you can use a computer if you like, but we're going to do a little bit of that. And then in the chat box, which if you hover over the bottom of the screen it'll pop up, if you could type in what you'd like to improve in your business, just kind of first gut reaction, if you could improve anything from this conversation today, what would it be? Yes, Anne. Other people sending me things on time.
Present company accepted.
Obviously. I'm afraid that's out of your control. I'm just going to put that out there. Anybody else? You can have a think. Put it in when you're ready. I guess many of us feel, not I guess, the people I speak to in my own life, I feel like there's this kind of, there's so much to be done and so little time to do it. And just, I often find that I am my most productive in the 10 minutes before my partner arrives home from work than I am at any other point during the day, in terms of, the dishwasher's loaded, there's food on the table, and it's literally done in the last kind of 10 minutes of the day. And I really find that for me a deadline helps. I don't know how you guys feel about deadlines. So Helen says, I feel I'm juggling too many things and there's no one to delegate to. Excellent. Smirts, just getting more done of the important critical things that make stuff happen. Excellent. Yeah, we're going to touch on that. Yeah, Helen, that's a really hard feeling, especially if you're a small business, if you're on your own, as it were. Who do you delegate to? My laptop broke recently. Well, I say broke, things stopped working, like the speakers, for example. And I was like, I'm going to have to fix this myself. And there is no IT department for me to go down and say, help. And that can feel really hard. So deadlines really help me. How do people feel about deadlines? Thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of. Obviously I can't see Joe and Smuts, so you may have to think. So Anne's got a thumbs up. Thumbs up. Yeah, we like deadlines, and I find they really help me, even though I often carry out the work right down to the wire. So for example, at 9:30 this morning I was just tweaking what I was going to say in this and just going through it again. But as I've already said, we live in that kind of, or this 24/7 kind of world where, oh, hello Smuts, we're seeing your screen. I don't know if you meant us to do that. if you didn't mean us to do it, just press it again and it should unshare. Is that right, Anne?
Yes.
So 24/7 commitments leave us really overwhelmed and burnt out, or at least it feels like we do. And we're always on Facebook or answering emails. My other half is a terror for answering emails at 11 o'clock at night. Does anyone else feel like they're kind of always on, so to speak?
Yes, sorry, I'm getting very distracted here. Smuts, I don't know if you can hear us or not, but could you stop sharing your screen, please? It's actually interfering with what we're doing.
I'll just pause for a minute.
I don't know if I can do anything with that. I'm just going to pause the recording until we sort this out. Oh, has he done it? Yes.
Yeah, it's sorted. It looks like it's sorted.
Okay.
Then you add in feelings of guilt for not spending time with loved ones and making a career for ourselves, and we have loads going on. And I'm terrible at remembering to drink, to sometimes eat, or if I do eat, I eat kind of, on the go, and I'm looking after everybody else, and I'm kind of thinking, oh well, I'll just fuel. So I think we're always thinking about other people, or in the most time we are. That's the feedback I get from lots of people. I don't know if that's true for you. I'm just looking through the comments. I've been getting a lot better at deadlines since starting the 12-week year. Yes, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because it's one of my favorite tools. I sometimes work best under pressure. Like you said, you get a lot done in 10 minutes, and we're going to talk about an exercise you can use based on that. I need to get better at not always being on. So yeah. Okay. Hold on, just pause the recording up. There you go. The life of being an entrepreneur and being a parent. It is great fun. So the good news is that you are not alone. 17%, and I'm sorry about this much, but 17% of women, I don't have the stats for men, feel like they can't achieve the right balance between career and family life. And if you're a mum, another 13% of us feel guilty about working. But there are some ways to make it easier, and I want to talk to you about 3 of those today. So context switching is the first thing I want to talk about. So how many of you multitask? You can put a kind of percentage, or you can hands up and then put a percentage in the question bar about how much of your time you think you spend multitasking, if any. I was busy typing. Try not to do it unless I get interrupted. Nice. I think Anne's the gold standard here, gang.
I've been practicing longer than everybody else.
So multitasking is defined as the apparent human ability to perform more than one task or activity over a short period of time. The phrase was actually coined by IBM in the 60s and was originally describing computers, not humans. But you know what we're like, we like to take it on board. So what have we got? 40% from Smuts, 40% overall from Helen, but a lot more during school holidays. Yeah, that is definitely true for me too. Feels like most of my life I seem to be multitasking, from Joe. So multitasking can result, in time being wasted and more errors made because we're not paying attention to what we're doing. And studies have shown that it's impossible to focus at more than one task at a time. And I heard this stats and I was like, yeah, but that doesn't apply to me. I'm an awesome multitasker. And then I attended a webinar by a guy called Todd Herman, who is a sports psychologist turned coach. And he talked about context switching. Say that 5 times fast. Okay, so there was a guy called Gerald Weinberg, and he wrote a book called Quality Software Management Systems Thinking. And he proposed a rule of thumb to calculate the waste caused by project switching. So I'm just going to share my screen. this one. Share screen. There we go. Can everybody see that? So this green column here is the amount of time available per project. So if you're only doing one, then 100% of your time is available. If you're doing 2 projects, then 40% of your time is available and 20% is lost to context switching, and I'll explain what that is in a second. And as you can see, by the time you get to your 3rd project, almost half your time is wasted in context switching. And that context switching is how your brain switches off from one task to the other. And so if we move down, so I want you to imagine some tasks that we have to do, and each task or goal takes 4 units of time. Now, the example I'm going to give is a ridiculous one, but I hope it illustrates the point. So I want you to imagine that you go into the kitchen and it looks like all the plates need to be washed, and you think to yourself, right, okay, I'm going to load the dishwasher. So that is task A. Task A is loading the dishwasher. You open the dishwasher and you realise that the dishwasher is already full from last night's dishes. So you have to unload the dishwasher, start doing that. And then I have a draining board, which I put the Tupperware and things I put on there to dry. So I go to do that and suddenly that's full as well. And I have to start doing that. And then in the midst of it, maybe I break something and I have to clear it up because that's a priority, especially if it's glass, so that's D. And then E, I get interrupted by the kids and I think, what was I doing? Ah, yes, I was loading the dishwasher, but it's still full and the thing on the dishboard is still full and I've been interrupted again, and I need to go through and I need to change a nappy or something. And as you can see that in your 4 units of time, you don't complete any goal at all. You might get partway through, but ultimately you've still got a gazillion things left to do. And that's a silly example that might happen over the space of, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour. But these can be, each of these rows could be a week in a month. So if you had longer term projects, the unit of time is irrelevant really. The fact is that when you're trying to do more things than you can do, you get interrupted. So if we said, use a downward arrow so it doesn't jerk about. So the best thing to do is to prioritize your goals and then get them done. So if we took one task on our grid and slightly change them, so for me task A might be to unload the draining board, so that is clear, so that when I then come to task B, which is to unload the dishwasher, I can load straight onto that or into the cupboards. Task C might be to load the dishwasher, and then task D might be to actually go and spend some time with my children so they don't feel the need to interrupt me every 5 seconds. And then task E might be doing something else. It doesn't really matter. And you can see that over a month, or as Helen's already mentioned, the 12-week year, you might set longer tasks that would be completed over a period of weeks or days, depending on what it is you're doing. And so in the same 20 units of time, we've achieved almost 5 tasks or goals rather than none. And of course, it involves prioritization, and you might need to be strict with yourself by not checking your emails and like me, not watching telly whilst you're trying to write a blog, which is what I was doing yesterday, and wondered why on earth writing my blog took me 3 times as long as it normally does, and it was because I'd got involved in MasterChef in the background. So a little lesson for me too in that. So does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. And so when it comes to scheduling tasks, as part of not multitasking, there are 3 things I would recommend. So the first is to do away with the to-do list and schedule what you can straight into your calendar. I think that's something, it was something I knew anyway, but I think that's something you advocate, Anne, anyway, in your Work Smarter course, isn't it? That
yeah.
to just put it straight in and block it out. Hi, Angela, we've got a yes. That maybe means that you can hear us. Excellent. And you can use the 3 things technique. So I learnt this in a conference I was at, and essentially you wake up and you write down the 3 things that you have to do today that are really important that you're going to prioritize. So for me, that would be this was number one. Number two is I need to go for a run. And number three, we we have to fix our rose bush in the back garden because it's completely collapsed, and we need to fix that up. So those three things have to be done today because the weather's good and Rich has only got 2 days of holiday left, and for me to do extra things. So once those three things are done, I might choose to add more things in, or I might say, do you know what, I've done my three things for the day. And they can be really small. So it might be I need to phone somebody and it's a 5-minute call, but I haven't made time for it, or I've been putting it off, or but today's the day that it's going to get done. And the sense of satisfaction from ticking that off is immense. The second thing is to break down tasks into 40 to 50-minute chunks. So there was a survey by Desk Time, which is a productivity app, that found that productive employees tend to take a 17-minute break for every 52 minutes of work. It's very exact, isn't it?
Very precise.
Very precise. And you can use different techniques. So I don't know if anybody's heard of the Pomodoro technique that was developed around the tomato-shaped egg timers that you can get. So you set your time for, say, 52 minutes, and then you work for those 52 minutes, and then when it dings, you stop working. I use the 15-minute fix. So you know how we were talking earlier about how much you can get done in 10 minutes? Well, the 15-minute fix is similar to the Pomodoro technique, that you set a timer, but it's for a maximum of 15 minutes. And you do the things that you have to do that are absolutely vital. And they might be things you don't enjoy. In fact, they're probably the things you don't enjoy, but they're essential to things ticking over. So it might be chasing invoice payments. It might be writing a blog post. For me this week, it's sorting out my domain names. It doesn't matter. Set a timer for 15 minutes for each task and then race through as much of it as you can and then stop. You'll be amazed at how focused and efficient you can be when the clock is ticking and the time's up against you. And once you've taken action, you won't feel guilty, promise. And knowing that you only have 15 minutes means that you have an escape route. You can tolerate almost anything for just 15 minutes, and you have a legitimate reason to walk away from the tasks that you are less comfortable with and move on with something else. Sometimes I use that as a reward, that if I do the horrible task first, it's a bit like eating my vegetables off my plate first. I get the nice thing at the end. Helen says, agree, it took me years to work out that if I schedule something, it gets done, and if I don't, then it probably won't. Which is exactly the point I'm making. Thank you, Helen.
I think one of the things in this scheduling, Charlie, is generally people in business forget that business is only part of life. And so they look at their 8-hour day or whatever it is that they think they've got to work. But within that 8 hours, lots and lots of people still have to do stuff that isn't related to work. You know, it's not like going out to to a factory or something where you're totally isolated for 8 hours. A lot of people are still fitting in, dentist appointment, doctor's appointment, buying shoes for the kids, food, washing up, making food, all kinds of things, often simply because they are at home. And those things have to get done sometime. So if they're not scheduled in for outside of working hours, they will encroach on what you designate as working hours. So that scheduling thing is just so important, but it has to include everything, not
Absolutely.
just work.
Yeah, because you're right. Otherwise, it piles up, and then at the weekend. So we went through a period of time where we spent. I was working full time. He was working full time. The kids were in preschool and nursery full time, and we had to do everything on the weekends and then we had no time together as a family, and that really hit home my values. And one of the things that I almost always do with my clients first thing is to get them to think about what's important to them. And I think as well, I learned this years and years ago when I just graduated. I think it was my first or second job, and a guy came in to talk to us about time management, and he said, what is so some people love working 80 hours a week, and that's okay. If you want to work 80 hours a week and that's your preference, and that's what you want to do, that's okay, as long as you feel that that's your balance. When it's not a balance is when you only want to work 20 hours a week but you're working 40 hours a week. So it's being really clear about what's important to you, and how much time you're willing to give to each of these things. And then and we'll come back to boundary setting in a minute. Helen's added, I'm amazed at how much of my day gets used up with household tasks. I didn't realise until I started time blocking. Yeah, absolutely. I had a conversation with my partner about this. He said, well, can't you just do it whilst you're working? And I was like, no, because then I'll spend the time. Do you know how long, loading the dishwasher is a great example, but washing, putting it in, getting it out, hanging it up, putting all the clothes away, like it's not just one task. It's the thought of just loading the washing machine. Yeah, it takes 2 minutes, but it's all the rest of it you have to do. But anyway, before I start ranting. So, and again, this next thing is something that I learnt before, but was reinforced. I went on Anne's Work Smarter, Not Harder course. It was brilliant, highly recommended. And not just because Anne is in the room, but identifying the tasks with the greatest impact. So make an inventory of everything you're trying to do, as we've just discussed, and identify those tasks that have the greatest impact in helping you achieve your goals and put them first into your calendar. And the things that are not going to help, cross them off, delegate them, outsource them. For example, the ironing, just don't do it. And think about, I don't know if you've heard the story about the philosopher's jar. So there's a professor, and he's got an empty jar, and he fills it with golf balls, and he says to his students, do you think the glass of the jar is full? And everyone goes, yes, yes. And then he pours in some pebbles and kind of gives it a shake, and they all settle in, and he says, is the jar full? And they all say, yes, yes, of course it is. Then he puts in some sand. Is it full? Yes. And he says the golf balls are the important things. They're your family, your children, your health, your friends, your favorite passions, those things that you hold really close. And that if everything else was lost and only they remained, your life would still be full. The pebbles are the other things that matter, like your job, your business, your house, your car. And the sand is everything else. It's the small stuff. But if you put the sand into the jar first, there's no room for the pebbles and there's no room for the golf balls. And the same is true for life, that if we spend it doing all the small things, it's really easy to then realize that we haven't spoken to our best friend for 6 months, or we haven't spent any time with our kids that day, or whatever it is that is important to you. So I would encourage you to find a technique that works for you, and to focus on one task at a time. And it's really difficult. I find it really difficult anyway. But to really make an effort to do that, and to schedule in your tasks so that you can see at a glance in your calendar. I've got some friends who do proper, beautiful planning, like bullet journals and proper paper planning, but it doesn't matter whether you use that or you use Google Calendar or whatever. Get it in, get it written down so that you can see what needs to happen. Okay, so that's context switching. That's the first thing. Now, I want you to just take perhaps a minute to think about your boundaries. So where do you feel comfortable saying no, and where don't you feel comfortable? And you can share it or not share it. It's entirely up to you. So I was saying to Anne that I'm a yes person. I say yes all the time. I have rescuer tendencies. I always want to help people. And I will always clear time in my calendar, and it's almost always at the expense of myself. And that is something that I am working on. So there was a mental health, the Mental Health Foundation found that when we work long hours, as in long for us, it's relative to what you want to do, long hours, 27% of employees felt depressed, 34% felt anxious, and 58% feel irritable. I definitely fall into the irritable category. And this comes around to thinking how many hours you want to work on your business and in your business versus how many you would like to work. I'm going to keep on going. Feel free to slow me down if you need to. And if you're somebody who takes on extra work, or you say yes, like I do, then my tip would be, and I'm not saying this is going to be easy, but try not to answer straight away. So say you'll get back to the person who's asking, and then use that time to decide if you want to say yes or no. There's no need to justify your actions or give excuses. Just, you decide and just say, sorry, I can't do that, or yes, I'm really happy to do it, whatever your answer is.
I think what helps there, Charlie, is if you've got very clear goals, things that you're really trying to achieve, and then you can look at whatever it is you're asked to do and say, is this going to take me closer to my goal or further away? And that often gives you the answer, whether it's a yes or a no.
Definitely. And also, is it important to your values? So that's that I get when people are looking at jobs, and we look and we say, okay, it's really important to you that you have a really short commute, and that job is over an hour away. That's not going to be a good fit. It might be possible, and it may be something you compromise on in the end, but as it stands, that's not going to be what you want to do. So yeah, when you're thinking about growing your business or finding balance, is saying yes to this going to help that? And I've got a question to ask you at the end of this section. If you have kids at primary school, you're asked to do a lot of voluntary fundraising stuff. Yes, you are, Helen. Yes. And I'm much better at being selective about what I agree to. I don't know if you guys saw on Twitter this week, a guy who live tweeted from he volunteered to go on the school trip with a bunch of 10-year-olds to the Science Museum. It's hilarious. If you put in Twitter Science Museum dad family school trip, it'll come up, and there's a lot of swearing in it, but it really opened my eyes as to what a school trip might look like, because I'd been thinking, I might volunteer for some. Absolutely not now, no way. So one of the things around boundaries, and we've already discussed a little bit around the 24/7 life that we have, is the incessant checking of emails and social media. Does it add productivity, or is it pointless stress? So are you thinking, has somebody liked my post? Is this, maybe I'm going to get a client out of it, or how far has it been shared? Is that helping you, or is that causing you anxiety? And actually, would it be better to turn off your notifications? And we almost always feel that we shouldn't turn off our notifications, because what if that person emails or notifies us to say we want to buy your product? But my question would be, well, how bad is it if they have to wait an hour or two for you to reply? I would encourage you to take at least once a week to disconnect entirely from your devices. It sounds crazy, or at least in the evening. Perhaps have a 9 p.m. rule, that after 9 p.m. you'll put down your phone and you'll leave it in a different room. Find it really helpful to look at the costs. So how long will it really take, and what do I need to say no to fit this in? Yes, it makes absolute sense, Helen. Yeah. And that's something, actually, I was watching MasterChef, and they said, they're going, how long are you going to have to plate up? And the guy's going 3 minutes, and the professional chef's going, it's never going to take 3 minutes, it's going to be more like 5. But we think that we can do things. I think this was in your course, Anne. We think that we can do more than we can in the time that we have, and we underestimate what we actually can achieve as well. Those two things they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, we overestimate what we can do in a day, but underestimate what we could do in a year.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you for the clarification. And that really stood out for me, although I couldn't remember the words. If you work from home, how many of you work from home? As in, your office is your home? Yes, I know Jo does as well, even though I can't see her. So being really clear on your physical boundaries within the house. So it has to work for you and your family. So we have an office that I'm in, but I quite often work in the sitting room because it's more comfortable. But the kids aren't there. And if I'm trying to work whilst the kids are here, I have to come away and do it in a different room so that they're really clear about where I am and that it's not okay to just interrupt, kind of thing. And that comes back to the context switching, that if you're constantly interrupted, you're essentially multitasking, and that is not going to make you the most productive you can be. And then when you aren't working, or just before you're about to stop, take a moment to just write down all the outstanding things that are left, and or any work things that are on your mind, and then close the calendar, turn off the computer and walk away. Really focus on the image of shutting it down. This is mindfulness, take a slow breath and acknowledge that you have left. And ideally you would do this at the office door, but depending where your office is, that might not work. But if say you drove to work, for example, when you are sitting at the wheel before you start the engine, take a moment to say, I'm leaving this and I'm going on to my next thing. And they're what I would call a tripwire. So it's something that has to happen. So when you finish your work, in most cases, you would shut your computer. Well, that's a tripwire. So the act of closing that down and walking away from it is important. Sometimes if you put the key in the door to open the door, that can be a tripwire as well. Yes, Joe, you work on your kitchen table, and that's really hard because like me, you've got two small children who are around your feet and kind of pressing buttons and doing all those different things, and it's not always easy to say, mummy is working right now, you can't interrupt, because a 2-year-old doesn't understand that. So finding some way of creating that balance, and it might be, or that boundary, it might be leaving the house and going to Costa and doing your work at Costa. Obviously you need to find childcare and things like that. Yeah. if only we have a lovely little cafe where we live, that we can do that too. So my question to you that I've already hinted towards is, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? If I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And if you prefer, you can ask yourself the reverse. So if I say no to this, what am I saying yes to? But it's just a question to mull over when you're thinking, should I say yes to this? What are you going to say?
And we were talking earlier, Charlie, before the call started, about understanding your own motivation for saying yes and no. So, you may decide that you're going to say yes to something because you want to push your own boundaries. You want to do something you've never done before. You want to scare yourself or stop being scared about something. So the reasons that you say yes or no are equally important, but really understanding those, and certainly not doing it out of a sense of guilt or all the other stuff that comes into it.
Or people pleasing, we do it. There's so many of us that people please, and we say, yes, of course I can help you. And then, so I said yes to a party recently, and as soon as I accepted the invitation on Facebook, I thought, how the hell am I going to get out of this? This was a massive mistake. And in the end, I just went back and said, I'm really sorry, I can't come.
Yep.
And that. But yeah, I felt guilty about saying no, but I should never have said yes in the first place because I didn't want to go. Okay, and so the third thing is thinking about how you work more productively. So I've already mentioned working smarter, not harder, which is something that Anne does, but it's quite a common phrase. And maybe your company, if you work for a company already, or maybe you as a business kind of encourage yourself to do that already. For some people, it's working flexibly. Other people work when their brain is most active. So for me, that's really silly early in the morning up until probably lunchtime. So are you can type this in the question bar, are you an early bird, or a night owl? When do you do your best work?
I'm definitely an early birder, but my husband's the other way around.
Yeah, I'm
which when you've got small children is a good thing, but not necessarily all the way through your life.
9 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's very specific, Helen. I like that you've thought about this. Joe, I've always done more in the evening. Yeah. I would happily get up at 4 and do 4 till 10. These days it's harder as I'm tired. Yeah, I feel that. So we come on then to slacking strategically. So I'm going to share my screen again. Hold on. This one.
That's normal, Helen.
So this is a picture that I stole off the internet by a lady called Christine Carter. And I just like the fact that she's called it slacking strategically. And so she said that before she learnt this, she would spend 10 hours at work, 3 hours at family time, an hour and a half on me time. A major stressor was multitasking, and she'd spend probably 2.5 hours doing that, and then 7 hours of sleep. And then when she found her sweet spot, this actually changed. So her work time went down by 2.5 hours. Her family time went up by 3/4 of an hour. Her me time, I don't know what, I can't even percentage that, but it went up from 1.5 to 5. And she got some more sleep. And the thing she's cut out is the major stressor, which was the multitasking. And she's worked it out by thinking about what she does in a day. So 4 hours of email and action items, 2.5 where she's thinking about work and she's kind of having flexi time, meeting time, and 3.5 hours of meetings. And then she's worked it out to actually look more like this. And so she stopped multitasking and she does one thing at a time. Let's stop sharing that. So one of the things I like about that, other than the fact she stopped multitasking, which we've already agreed is not productive, is to think about when you do your best work. So Joe's already said in the evening, Helen and I and Anna are all morning people, is to do your work in those hours and say, right, this is my time for doing my most important work, because that's when I am at my most focused. But it's also important that you do things just for fun that aren't on your list. So I don't know, going for a walk outside, or doing silly things with your children or your friends, or reading a book. And you're probably thinking, I could never do that. I have to, and then you can insert 500 good reasons why you couldn't possibly take a break. But the truth is that I make time for breaks because it's important that giving myself the rest time makes me more productive, because I do it strategically. So I take breaks at designated times for regular intervals, and I sharpen my focus when I sit back down to work. And that stops me feeling overwhelmed. It allows me to focus on one thing at a time. I work when I have the most energy, and I can be more creative, and I find myself in flow. And you might be thinking, well, what does that mean? What does flow mean? And you know that moment where you look up from what you're doing and you've completely lost track of time, and you only meant to read that chapter, but you finished the whole book, or you started a meeting about X and you found yourself getting really excited about a new project and going off at a tangent. Well, that's flow. And it was coined by a guy whose name I can never pronounce, but Mihaly, no, I can't do it. He's a professor of psychology and management at Claremont Graduate University, and I can, in fact, I can copy and paste it into the bar. Let's do that so that you can look him up if you want to. And he's written books on it, and it's really, really fascinating how he does it. And the reason that this is useful for working more productively is that one of the lesser known precursors to getting into flow at work is knowing where you are in your workflow. So that constant awareness of what's coming next is what keeps you focused, and that's where the engagement comes from. So and for me, a lot of it is about self-care and making sure that you add in breaks and you add in rewards. And if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend reading The 12-Week Year, because that essentially puts all of what I've said into one easy tool that you can use. And through Drive, we have a little Slack group that keeps us accountable and helps us set out our things that we have to achieve for the day and helps us focus. And you reward yourself at the end for achieving your goals. And the final thing I want to say is that, and it's the most important thing, and if it's the only thing you take away this: no one gets it all done. It's an illusion. It's a fallacy that we buy into. And one thing I've learned, particularly since becoming a parent, is that we can't do it all, and that we need to prioritize and we need to choose what's important to us. And so lots of people say to me, well, how do you get it done? How do you run a business and study and do all these things? Well, I don't iron unless it's absolutely vital, and it's never my clothes. I don't deep clean. I don't wash the car or the windows. I don't always make a healthy dinner. Sometimes I eat cereal. I don't wash the dishes. The dishwasher does that. But in all seriousness, I choose what's important to me. I choose where I'm going to add value, where I'm going to refill my cup, for want of a better word. So I get my partners and kids involved. I pay somebody to come and clean the house once a fortnight, and it was a huge decision for me. I had to let go of a whole load of gremlins about it, about, you know, what people would think, how much money it was going to cost. And what I've realized is that I can't afford not to. There's a choice about how you spend your time, and we all have things we don't want to do, especially when we're by ourselves. So Helen, you know, you were saying, well, who do I delegate to? And there isn't always somebody. You have to just suck it up and get it done. But if you can delegate it, do delegate it, and it'll make your life easier. Right, that's it. I'm done talking.
That's brilliant, Charlie. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right. If anyone has any questions for Charlie, I'll unmute everyone now, and you can just, you know, as I say, if you've got any questions, we've got 5 minutes left, so we'll need to be fairly quick and fairly disciplined about it. So I'm just unmuting people.
What other people think is the most useless thought? Yes, it is. And if you're in the and Joe, I can add you to the drive group. But if you want to take it, we can take it offline and talk about it in there, I'm sure.
Yes, actually, that's a really good idea, because for Smuts and Joe, we've got a fantastic Facebook group where there are other people who are already engaged with this idea who couldn't make it onto the call today. So it would actually be really good for us to take the discussion over there and talk about what we've learnt and what we want to carry on. So I think that's a great idea.
Yes.
You okay with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So it just remains for me to say thank you to Charlie then, and we'll get the recording out to everyone else, and we hope to see you again on another of these sessions. Thanks for joining us, everybody.